Good morning and happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Hope you're enjoying your day. I'm sitting here watching the Lions get their butts kicked yet again on Thanksgiving. The Packers are pulling out the game of their lives against the 8-3 Lions. Man, did the Lions ever win on Thanksgiving? I cannot remember the last time. But yeah, looks like it's going to be the same old today for the Detroit Lions. They just cannot seem to win, and they always play at home. It's the weirdest thing. Anyways, just going to go over some games you can see on screen. I've got 4 helmets right in the middle of the standings highlighted. We've got Alabama, California, Penn State, and Georgia shown here. The reason for this is because these teams are all squaring off in huge matchups. This week, you've got Cal taking on Penn State, and you've got Alabama taking on Georgia. And these games have pretty serious playoff implications, championship bracket implications in this league. There's going to be some tiebreakers potentially this season. I think for sure there's going to be some tiebreakers. And I jotted down the records of all the teams that are involved in the bubble situation, the teams that are like on the cusp of maybe making the championship bracket or being dumped. And what I've come up with is Texas is really in a bad spot. They're 1-4 when you look at common opponents amongst teams that they'll probably be facing in a tiebreaker situation. And these teams would include the following: Texas, Michigan, Georgia, Penn State, California, Alabama, and Colorado. These teams could very well all factor into a tiebreak situation if they end up with 7 wins. So I see Texas at 1-4 against those common opponents, followed by Michigan at 2-3. So those two teams with losing records, and they're the only ones of the group with losing records. So they both have uphill battles to fight. It looks like 3 teams have pretty much clinched, and that would include San Diego State, New Mexico, and Maryland, which leaves this other group of teams that I just mentioned with 7 teams. And of these 7 teams, 3 are going to have to get dumped. So I would say that Texas and Michigan have the toughest road. Texas taking on Cal as one of the opponents that's on the bubble that they have ahead. And that's going to be in week 13. And then Michigan takes on Colorado in week 13. But this week, the big battles are going to be, like I said, Cal and Penn State. And then you have Alabama versus Georgia. Now, in the first matchup that I'm going to look at, it's going to be California-Penn State. We have a California team that looks very capable of taking care of business here. And if they do so, California looks like they are going to all but clinch a spot in the championship round. They do have Texas next week, which is another bubble team. But California, if they can beat Penn State this week, is going to have a 4-1 record against bubble teams. And that would go a long way for them because the worst record they could have would be 4-2. So it looks like Cal could really set themselves up with a victory here in this game against Penn State. Penn State, on the other hand, is 2-2 against a bubble team. So this loss, if it happened, would drop them to 2-3. That would be a tough hole to climb out of. They have Alabama in week 13. Now, the only thing about Alabama I'll say is that they aren't going to have Justin Fields in week 13 for sure because he's on a bye. And that's why the Alabama-Georgia game is so important this week. Alabama really needs a win here. Alabama is currently sitting at 2-2 against bubble teams, while Georgia is sitting at 3-1. Now, Georgia could more afford a loss here, I think, than could Alabama. Georgia, on the other hand, has only one more game against the bubble teams, and that is this week against Alabama. If they lose it, they would drop to 3-2. They would certainly have to win their final game of the season to have a good shot, and it looks like they would have a pretty solid shot at making the championship round, but it's no sure thing. On the other hand, Alabama dropping to a losing record this week, if they lose to Georgia, would then set them up for a game where they wouldn't have their quarterback, Justin Fields, in week 13 when they play against Penn State. So Alabama's got a couple of really tough games coming up here in week 12 and 13, especially because, like I said, Justin Fields being out. in Week 13 is really going to make things tough on them against Penn State. And that's why I really feel like Alabama needs this win today versus Georgia. If Alabama is going to win this game, they're going to depend on their offense mostly. It's going to be Justin Fields, the quarterback, and it's going to be the running game that's going to get it done for Alabama. Last week, Justin Fields had a huge game. He had 10 fantasy points. He's averaging 7 points per game, and he's very capable of taking this game onto his shoulders, and he's going to have to, I think. But fortunately for Alabama, they also have a pretty good running attack led by Brian Robinson and Gus Edwards. And both, as you can see, had big games last week, with Robinson scoring almost 6 points and Gus Edwards at almost 7 points. They also have Savon Ahmed as well as Antonio Gibson. Gibson has been, of course, a disappointment this year after a couple of promising seasons in the NFL. He is limited this week by a toe issue, and as you can see on the season, he hasn't really been much of a factor anyways. Although at times he can step up. In week 10, he had 3.5 points. In week 9, he had 3.66 points. So if he could add on, if he could just provide a little extra running attack for Alabama, it gives them a good opportunity to win this game. And the reason is Georgia doesn't really have much of a running attack, and they're going to be without a quarterback this week, as Badgett, of course, was getting starts because Justin Fields was benched in Chicago. As you can see here, Tyler Algier is the number one running back for the Georgia attack, and he's only averaging 2 fantasy points a game. Alabama's strength really lies with their defense, and that's where they're going to need to win this game. I don't think they can stand up to the Crimson Tide in terms of offense. So it's going to be very important that this team come through, Georgia that is, come through with some of their strengths, like Kyle Pitts on offense at tight end. Also, they do have a decent wide receiver crew, although George Pickens is experiencing some injury issues. KJ Osborne has seen an overall downgrade in his numbers. Georgia also coming with a pretty strong pass rush, great defensive backs, including the linebackers. Everything on defense looks great for Georgia. They're just like their real-life counterparts. They're a very good defensive team, and they can win this game defensively, but that's what it's going to come down to, in my opinion, because without a quarterback and only your wide receivers to lean on, while Alabama's got their quarterback playing, and he's playing very well, and then on top of that, they've got a great running attack. It's going to be tough for Georgia to win without defense playing a part in this game. Looking at the wide receivers for Alabama, this is a weakness, however. They only have Rashid Shaheed performing right now. Rashad Bateman has been pretty much a disappointment ever since he entered the league, and he's definitely a disappointment this year, as you can see, with just 1.5 fantasy points. Jameson Williams also has been a big-time disappointment. That being said, I'm not really sure how he is performing today. Jameson Williams is having an okay game today. At least he's putting some numbers on the board. He has 2 catches for 51 yards and 2.5 fantasy points. Looking at the game right now, the Packers have the ball with the clock ticking, so hard to say if Jameson Williams can play a factor, but maybe he does get in there if the Packers send the ball back Detroit's way. Perhaps Jameson Williams can add on here for. So right now, Alabama is not getting huge production from their guys today so far, but again, I think it really comes down to their quarterback and their running backs in this one. Switching gears to the California-Penn State game, I'm looking at the box score right now. Penn State comes in 6-5, California 6-5. I really think California can take advantage today. They are getting big performance from Christian Watson or the Penn State Nittany Lions, however. He has 5 catches for nearly 100 yards, including a touchdown. He's got almost 6 fantasy points. This is going to be important for Penn State. The Nittany Lions, of course, big strength is their quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, who has been hot at times this year, but not always. It's going to be important if Devon Achane comes into this game. That's going to be a big factor. If they can get something from him this week, that would make a big difference for Penn State. But honestly, I think California's got their number here. California coming with Will Levis at quarterback. He's adequate. I think he'll possibly even perform better this week. He's playing against the Panthers, so perhaps Will Levis has a bigger game. Jalen Warren has been red hot of late, and they also have Chuba Hubbard. And then, of course, they do have a great wide receiver crew led by Jacoby Myers. Justin Jefferson is supposed to come back this week, and that would be big for California. I think that they can win this game easily over Penn State if they get production offensively. California also with a sound enough defense to get this one done. Now, the secondary not as deep as some of the others in the league. That is kind of a weakness for the Golden Bears. By comparison, Penn State, not much better really at the defensive back position. Penn State does have some decent linebackers. Jordan Brooks, of course, one of the best in the league. And on the front line, not too impressive there for this team, the Penn State Nittany Lions. So I think they're vulnerable. And also, another thing to remember is Penn State would drop to 2-3 versus bubble teams. If they lose here, Cal would go to 4-1 if they can win this game against the bubble teams. That almost guarantees they get into the championship bracket. With 6 wins, California is actually, I think, pretty set in getting into the championship bracket. They have Penn State this week, and they have Texas next week. Obviously, if they beat Texas, then they're in for sure. But I think just simply beating Penn State this week might be enough for California to get over and get into that championship bracket and have a chance to turn some heads there in the 2023 season. Well, I'll probably make another video tomorrow, maybe going over the box scores from today. There's 2 more games to go. It's Thanksgiving Day, so 2 more games. We got the Niners and the Seahawks playing tonight. And then Dallas, of course, plays this afternoon. I can't remember who they're playing. Just bear with me real quickly here as I check it out. Dallas is playing the Washington Redskins, of course. That's a typical Thanksgiving Day matchup. So we got those games to go, and we'll have a little bit more of an idea of what everybody has done to this point of the week. Normally, there's only 1 game on Thursday night, so this is definitely an extra special Thursday edition of football. On a side note, before I go, I just want to say that in the time that I've been on this earth, I cannot remember the Rams ever playing. That's my team, the Los Angeles Rams. I cannot remember a time they played on Thanksgiving Day. I looked it up once, and I think they played way back in the 70s sometime. Now, I was around back in the 70s, but I was a little kid, and I had no idea about rooting for the Rams. I did like football. I played with my friends and stuff, but I didn't pick up being a Rams fan until like 1979, I think it was, the year they went to the Super Bowl against the Steelers. But, man, I mean, is it not overdue? Even the Seahawks are getting a Thanksgiving Day game. I mean, come on, NFL, if you're listening, it's time to get the Rams out there on Thanksgiving Day. I would love it. So with that, I'm just going to wish you guys once again a happy Thanksgiving, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.